The Mason County Sheriff Casey Salisbury, as it's time for the Sheriff's Sit Down. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Just kind of reminiscing and talking about the first day of school and how it's changed, especially around the Shelton area, as the new look to the high school is getting the finishing touches on some of those new buildings, and Mountain View Elementary is brand new. But you remember a time when the new school was the old school was the new school.
It was the new school. I remember as a kid when they started with Shelton High School and they opened the stadium that first fall, and my brother's team got to play up there a couple of games, but the school wasn't done yet. And then the next year they moved in, and that was a big deal. I remember going into the auditorium at Shelton High School and thinking how big that was and how beautiful that thing was when it was there when I was a kid. So it's a big difference. And I remember going in the Irene S. Reed building and the old junior high too. So that's not good when you can remember those things. It's been a while.
Lots of big changes here in town as over the years, and one of the things is we want to make sure kids and parents and everybody are getting ready to get to school. Some have perhaps already picked up the bus for the first time this morning. Some others may be waiting, and people just got to make sure they're aware of what's going on.
Yes, today it's still still light out, and quickly that hours of darkness will change on us, and that becomes very hazardous when it gets to that point. And I know that the last few days, the heavy rains, of course, everybody experienced that, and especially in the Seattle area and things. But I was listening to the State Patrol's broadcast on the number of collisions they responded to, probably because of hydroplaning, people driving too fast, and the water got deep quick on the roadways. But the same thing, that initial rain and changeover and visibility and all those things become a factor in the mornings, and it is a safety issue for kids.
When it comes to just driving around the school zones, you'll see the flashing lights and traffic fines are double, and they are not negotiable at all.
No, and the other one that is always concerning for those of us that are out in the county, the school buses. I know people get impatient, and they just get really impatient and do really things that are not good around school buses. A lot of those buses in areas in the county, they can't pull off the road as far as people would like them, because there's not really a run out shoulder on the roadway. It just goes right to a 4-foot deep ditch in areas, and people get irritated with that. And those drivers are doing the very best they can to keep kids safe and get them on and off the bus. And we just ask people for patience. If you're that impatient, get up and leave a little bit earlier. But to press those school bus drivers is very nerve-wracking for them. They've got kids getting on and getting off the buses, and they're pulling in and out of traffic with that bus. And it's very difficult on some of our county roads. I mean, there's a lot of places that's not easy to pull off. There's blind curves, and it's just very challenging for them. So we just ask for that patience in there.
The kids are so excited if they're walking to school or riding their bikes. Sometimes they'll be with the friends, and there'll be a group of friends, and they're all out playing and having a good time, darting out behind parked cars and things like that. That's why those speed limit zones are there, and that's why they're asking you to take it slow through some of those zones.
I know on northbound 3, there's a couple areas up around the Belfair area that they're right on the highway where they're slowing down and pulling off or at the edge of the road, loading kids on, and the speeds through there. The speed is still what it is, but you still got to use due care and caution. But this time of year, it's real challenging. As I really worry about as it gets darker, it's really, really tough to see. If you go out just in the evening and watch somebody wear dark clothing and walk away from you or a distance from you, it's almost impossible to see them. The difference in the dark and the light clothing or reflective clothing makes a big difference.
I noticed early this morning on my way in, it was very foggy. It kind of lifted now, but the fog will be rolling in. Like you said, it'll get dark here earlier and later, scratch that, later in the mornings and earlier in the evenings. And before you know it, it'll be majority dark around here, and so you just got to be careful.
Yeah, that's a huge issue. I just don't think people understand how much of an issue. Of course, that's why you see all the utility people and things wearing the bright yellow vests, and it makes a huge difference. We had a training a few years ago that we took part in called Below 100, and it was getting traffic deaths down, but it was showing videos from inside cars and what it looks like coming up on a utility workers or things like that are on the side of the road if they do or they don't have a traffic vest on. And so that's why you'll see many of our guys are supposed to be putting theirs on, and a lot of our uniforms that the guys wear, that the deputies are on the road with, they have reflective material on them. So when they get out, they can be seen, because it's really, really tough at
You've
night.
been around for a long time now as a student of the area, through being a teacher of the area, now law enforcement for the area. What's it like? And then kids that have come up through the system. It's an exciting time right now, though.
Oh, it's for me, this last few years, I taught for a number of years, and I think one of the neatest things that I used to tell kids would ask me when they were little, especially the elementary kids, they always say, "Why do we have to do this?" Mm-hmm. And I used to tell them, because someday you'll be my boss, you'll be taking care of me. And I'm telling you what, I have a number of kids that went through that are now physicians, and a couple of them have worked on my family. And to watch them come through, and now they're surgeons and things out of the Olympia area, to see them come through. And what I remember about them is one student, actually a couple of them in particular, people say, well, they seem so young coming in, but I can tell you that from the time I had those kids, especially the couple that are surgeons, you knew they were going that direction, because everything they did was precision. You could tell by watching the way they did their work. They followed directions. They just did everything immaculately. And I think about them now going in there, I think if that's remembering back to what they were like as students, if that's the person that's doing the operation, that's the one I want, because I can remember them, how precision they were, and I can imagine that they're that way now.
So you do, and you always wonder if you see a teacher that you had, if as a student oh, there's Mr. Salisbury. You do remember majority of the kids, or there are some that stand out? And
I'll tell you what's really, really tough. See, I had taught a kindergarten class for a very, very short term out at Hood Canal when I very first got out of college. And I hadn't even got home and had a certificate yet, and they put me to work. Mm-hmm. And I took a third grade class out there for Mrs. Ferdine for a short time. And then I got a call from another district that really needed a teacher, and that's where I got hired. And I spent most of my time in 5th and 6th grade, and then some high school classes. But by the time kids are in 5th grade, and the girls, to me, their little faces and stuff as they grow up, you know who they are. Mm-hmm. The boys, I always laugh because they used to be shorter than me. And some of those boys, when they go from being much, much shorter than I am to being 6'4", 6'5", and they're 230 pounds of the beard, and they've gained 120 pounds or 130 pounds, they're kind of tough sometimes. Sure. Some of the boys will come up and they'll look at you, and you can almost tell by their eyes who they are as soon as they say something. But it's gotten tougher over the years as I've gotten older and they've gotten older. But I'm so proud of so many of those kids that I had in school, and I think how many of them are working in the community now. And I guess what makes you feel old, and I do the same thing. I still ask my parents about some people in the community, because we were never allowed to call. It was always a Mr. or Mrs. when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. So I didn't even know some people in our community today. They're adults. I still don't know their first names. I grew up with them as Mr. and Mrs. Or I always laugh like Coach Crater and Coach Stark. That was their name.
Yeah, Coach.
I didn't know them anything else than Coach Crater and Coach Stark going through, and Coach McKinnon. I didn't know their first names. Didn't make any difference. But I see them around the community now. And I spoke at Rotary last week at one of the clubs, and actually Mr. Stark was there and some other teachers. I think about how much they did for us, and through other activities other than just teaching, and the difference they make. And I just thank every one of those teachers that I had the chance to have going through. I really did. I don't mean anybody's any different now. I had some great teachers that when I went on to college and took some classes that made it very, very easy for me when I got there. And all of them are now retired. But I see them around the community, and I think as a teacher, you always remember when a kid comes up to you and they call you Mr., especially when I was very young. I was just a little over 21 when I started teaching. I mean, I was really young. And kids see me now and they still call you Mr. It makes you feel kind of different. But I remember them, they did a great job, and now I see them coaching and teaching in schools now, kids that I had as students, that are coaching and teaching, and different roles in the community, and they just do a great job. Just one more that made me think of, Mr. Tarrant. Mm-hmm. You probably had Mr. Tarrant in here.
Yeah.
We had him in high school for a class called Civics, And the one thing that I always remember that Mr. Tarrant would tell us, he says, if you want to complain about something, and then you should run for office and do something about it. And he used to say that all the time. And he says, someday I'll run for office. And, all those years later when I came back here, Mr. Tarrant ran and became mayor. And I always thought that was a really neat thing, because he used to tell us that as a kid. And then he said, you can do something and change it if you want to do it, run for office. And he did it. I always thought that was a pretty neat thing, that he followed through with that, what he told us as high school kids many years ago.
That's great. That's great. Some fun stories today as we kind of kick off the start of the school year in the Shelton School District. And it's fun to hear those things for sure. And again, for the drivers and everybody else out there, be safe and make sure everybody gets to school safe today. Good to see you.
Take care.